I know the power of story, and everybody has got a story.
Portland, of all places, there's a lot of tough conversations.
Well, we're going to explore what we can do to make a difference in the community. We're going to hear a lot of opinions and ideas.
The mission of Portland Interview Magazine podcast is to connect.
This is the Portland Interview Magazine podcast with your host, David Bentley, on TalkCast PDX.
Welcome back to Portland Interview Magazine, where you'll find people here in Portland that are notables and unnotables that are interesting to discover in our great city here. Today, we have a very unique guy, in my opinion, for sure, and many would probably share the same. Alex Hofberg is with us today in the studio. And Alex is the founder of Watchworks in Portland, a very successful company since 1989. He opened, there's a little bit more to the story than just that, but he opened a store down in Portland. And I find it really fascinating, his journey and how he got to where he is today. And as far as I'm concerned, it's very inspiring, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Welcome, Alex.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so my audience likes to jump right into it, and not, get dancing right away.
Why shilly-shally?
Yeah. So I'm gonna lay it on you a little bit and have you take us through a little bit of your journey, and because it all starts somewhere for you, and there's plenty of people that are watching this and knows about Watchworks in Portland. And can you give me kind of where the start of coming to Portland came from, and get us up to speed?
I had some ideals of being in the recording engineering business way back, have a technical degree in sound engineering. Never could make a dime at it. Supported myself through the hospitality industry, both bartending and restaurant management. And at some point I realized that was not going to be a career path that I was willing to put the rest of my life to. A change of scenery, I figured, was going to be a catalyst for moving forward professionally. I grew up on the East Coast. I put everything I owned in a van, drove cross country to visit my sister and stay. Maybe she didn't know that. I may have outstayed my welcome. I lived with her and her husband and a newborn baby for a few months until she showed me the door. And I found a room in a communal lifestyle house right over by Good Samaritan Hospital, large and drafty, 3 floors. I lived in an unheated attic, but it was cheap and I liked it, and I liked my housemates. And by pure coincidence, being large and drafty and mostly empty, there was another housemate, a fellow by the name of Carlton, who I'm still very much friends with, is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
He had an interest in buying and selling antiques and oddities, and strangely had been a watchmaker in a prior life. He was working out at the airport repairing flight instrumentation, which was sort of a kindred technical aptitude. And together we started hitting the garage sales and flea markets and dumpsters and estate sales, looking for things for our home, but in essence, looking for things that we could turn a buck on. And we became professional pickers. We were not limited to watches and jewelry. We bought Mixmasters and toasters and vintage salt and pepper shakers and furniture, pinball machines, anything that was beautifully made that seemed undervalued.
What time are we talking about? What year?
1987-ish.
Okay.
And by pure coincidence, in 1987, we started to see the very beginnings of a collectible wristwatch market. Prior to that, anybody who considered themselves a collector of timepieces typically collected pocket watches or clocks. And although there were expensive wristwatches then, there was not at all a phenomenon of collecting them. As Carlton and I worked the streets in a variety of different ways, we also, by some coincidence and some happenstance of time, found a bunch of dead or dying watchmakers who had accumulated hordes of equipment, watches, tools, machinery, books on the subject, everything you could possibly need to be in the watch repair or watch sales business, as they had often been trained post World War II as part of the GI Bill, and they were aging out by the late 80s. So together we bought up multiple estates of that sort of goods, watches, machinery, and really started to get much more focused on specifically the watch market. As he had some experience at the time, he taught me the basics of mechanical watch repair, as well as the basics of where to sell them.
Well, there's a time. Well, obviously, he had a background in watches,
Yeah.
so that was helpful.
Yes.
You obviously, learned a great deal and had a knack for it yourself, and then you guys grew together. But when did that really start to become going from like education and collecting these watches? Were you selling as you're collecting, and you kind of like it just kept building an inventory and
We had no money, so anything that came in the door went back out in the form of sales in a variety of different ways. Originally, I was looking to some of the established jewelers and buy-sell shops in Portland. I was posting handwritten notes on the bulletin board at Portland State University, both buying and selling Rolexes. I was bicycling around town with a knapsack on my shoulder with a couple of different high-grade watches in it, and literally peddling them.
well, this sounds like a East Coast guy comes here and works hard.
Yeah. And really, it wasn't at all to me about, I was supporting myself, but every profit went into bigger and better stuff continuously, and still does.
But you're enthusiastic about it. It wasn't like, I imagine, I guess it was hard work and you had to hustle and all that, but you enjoyed it. It was a subject you enjoyed, or did you learn to enjoy it?
I had no idea prior to entering this arena that I would enjoy it, but I love the chase. I love the hunt. I love the kill. The money's boring. The product, the stories, the uniqueness of these things, the craft, the heritage, that's the fascinating part. Getting paid, yeah, that's just more money, but it's really an opportunity to go out and hunt some more, and that is the fun part.
So when you look to when did it happen that you wanted to graduate into your own retail shop? How does that? Because a lot of people, obviously nowadays, there's a lot of home businesses. A lot of people are doing a lot of things, but to make a decision to get committed on Main Street, wherever you're at, is a whole different commitment. And obviously, you could look at it as a new source of customers and these kinds of things. What was going through your mind, and how did that evolve?
That takes me back to your first question about the sort of how and why this all happened. After joining that household over on Northrop Street, I enrolled at Portland State University to finish an unfinished bachelor's degree, and started in the business school, and I earned a Bachelor of Science in Information Systems and Quantitative Analysis, which is a business degree of computers, and figured
Not nerdy
I was
at all. Not nerdy at all.
gonna work for Arthur Andersen or a
Yeah.
consulting company
Yeah.
or some corporate gig. However, I also had this side business rolling that was paying for books and tuition and my rent. And as I was beginning to get close to graduating, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife of 30 years, Maureen, and I chatted about what the next steps were. And we talked about entering the job market. And we talked about this hip pocket business that was pretty fun and lucrative. And I said, maybe for now, the hip pocket business should be developed more fully. And at that moment, I had a close friend who had an established jewelry store. He had often struggled to make his bills and pay his nut. And I formed a cooperation with him. to work through his store, and then not long afterwards split off to open my own establishment.
In hindsight, when you look back, that was a big advantage to step in and share almost a space and to get going when you look at the whole strategy.
Given that I had $10,000 to my name, which may or may not have been a sizable amount of money. It seems like little to me now. It was everything I had then. It was an entree to go a little bit more, downtown Main Street. And ultimately, we don't make our money when we sell watches. We make our money when we buy watches. And having a street front location was a giant catalyst to getting access to the market.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we only have so much time here today. So I want to jump into some areas and take you into more of today and what's going on. Now, before we do that, let's start with the store. You had how many years there, and what was the lead up to closing the store? I think I have my own guesses on that, but I want to hear it from you.
The store was between Morrison and Yamhill for 30 years. We grew some. We went from vintage to new as well as vintage. We introduced jewelry, hired a goldsmith, had a staff of 11 towards the end. And we're just knocking it out of the park. Watchworks was kind to their customers. Our customers liked what we did. They liked our product mix. The market was continuing to develop and evolve.
I want to stop for a second there. The product mix was good. I mean, you had a lot of great used stuff that was collectible, but then you also had some really great new lines that you had incorporated in your store and that you were sold on.
And that was, I've always said that I'm blessed having a business where I can really believe in the product. If I didn't like the product, I wouldn't sell it. Imagine having a business where you were selling things that you didn't believe in. How grueling that might be, or how insincere it would be.
And to the point of that, when we see the Apple Watch or people look at their phones first time, I think this is an important question because it's a marketing question. It's a value proposition question in terms of how people communicate maybe to other people with what they wear, what they, however they want to display themselves. Watches are fashion, they're statement pieces, they're investments. They're a lot of things. Now, there's a phone and a watch that Apple comes out with, and they're like, I'm just wondering, how did you view that when you saw that coming on the horizon, like the Apple Watch, and you're like going, well, that's still not a beautiful timepiece, let's face it.
I'm not a watch snob.
Yeah.
I believe that it's all about utility. And if connectivity is part of your game plan, it's a fantastic device.
Okay.
People would come to me constantly and say, how are you even in the watch business? Is anybody wearing watches? Everybody has a phone. Everybody is connected in this way or that way. And one real answer is the Apple watches and connected devices of the world were actually beneficial to retrain people to get used to having the time on their wrists, because there were a lot of people who had gotten out of the habit. But conversely, the Apple Watch is probably not that engagement gift. It's not that. It's not the anniversary gift. It's not retiring from your company. A watch has always been a symbol of a important, momentous event, or being part of a particular league, of a club, a clique, show off. The Wall Street Journal, marvelously, 2 different articles, 2 different offers, answered the same question within a few months of one another. The question was, why would a CEO be wearing a $500,000 watch? And the first author answered that question with, well, he's sending a subtle message to the people at the boardroom table around him that my time is worth more than yours. And you have to chuckle at that. I mean, there is a reality there. The second author, this is completely spontaneous. There was no coordination here. Pretty much answered the same question with a different answer, which I equally liked. It was his Aston Martin is 19 floors down in a basement where no one can see it. You got to love that too.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to let's go back now. Let's go back to the store now. Obviously, it was very successful. You employed you're a local guy. You employ local people. You pay people well for their time. So no pun intended.
I've heard two. I didn't catch you on the first one. We don't have unlimited time. I was like, I got plenty of time.
Yeah. So now, it couldn't have been an easy decision to pull out of Portland at that time. But again, there's a lot going on in Portland, and I'd love for you to kind of dive in on how that led up to the decision.
The pandemic had us immediately evacuate downtown. I took all of the inventory that mattered, some equipment, a couple of computers, and created a temporary bridgehead in a rental house that I happened to own that was unoccupied that day. It was very convenient. It wasn't the safest thing to do. I had to do a lot of coordination with my insurance company to make sure that we were covered adequately, but we were able to continue to answer the phones and do some business and take care of some things in a city that was truly locked down. And we stayed there for a number of months, and sometime towards the end of May, the city started to ease restrictions, May of 2020. Ease restrictions and allow certain kinds of boutiques, certain kinds of retailers to begin to reoccupy. So we created a plan for how to keep safe and a footprint path in the store and hand sanitizing stations. And we cleaned and we repopulated and moved all the inventory back and the computers and the equipment and the watchmaking services. And 4 days later, this was basically on a Monday when George Floyd was being choked to death, and by Friday, the city erupted. And I probably, in retrospect or hindsight, should have given it a few more weeks of let's see how all things shake out. But we were eager to get back to work, get back to business. Mm-hmm. And we moved everything back into that store, got it all set up. We were open for 2 days. Mm-hmm. And then the front windows were completely blown out at 2 a.m. There were multiple people inside. Every alarm, every motion detector, every glass break is shrieking. My wife and I drive downtown at 2 a.m. to find the entire front of the store breached. And police gathered over by the Starbucks outside at the Target lobby, diagonally across the street at the Galleria. And they would not walk over to at least walk the premises with me to see if there were still anybody inside. And they could not be harangued or shamed into assisting us. And I went in by myself and found no one, found at least 2,000 pounds of broken glass. Glass is very heavy, and when you smash every window and many of the showcases.
Oh, your showcases went down too?
Well, there was some product in them. We put away into big vaults the most valuable things and 90% of the inventory, but there was always low-hanging fruit. And we suffered a really substantial loss. Luckily, it's insured. Mm-hmm. However, the operating a high-value jewelry store behind boards seemed not optimal. Putting my staff during a pandemic into coming downtown, which had become a little bit of a zombie apocalypse between pandemic and homelessness and rioting and flashbangs and the police and, every kind of nightly demonstration and repeated destruction, to put my customers at risk who want to come down and find us. It was all about the safety of the product, our staff, our clients, our own sanity. And it was a very challenging decision, but we reverted back to the rental house with a whole bunch of work and a lot of licking our wounds, and immediately pulled the plug on the store.
Was that difficult to do through contract or through leases or, these kinds of arrangements?
In a strange silver cloud, my lease was expiring October 1st of 2020. We were fully moved out by August 1st of 2020. So there was very little downside to that. My landlord, who I like very well as a close friend, cried when I gave him the keys back. It was very hard for us. I put every ounce of my soul and energy and being at the expense of my family, at the expense of my wife, at the expense of my son, into focusing on that very, very strongly. And it was devastating. But we agreed that the city couldn't protect us. I won't get into the politics of should we rely on the city to protect us, but it was clear that they couldn't or wouldn't. And we had to take action. Prior to, let's just say, February of 2020, I had plans of expanding, of adding more lines, of possibly opening a more upscale boutique. Business could not have been better. And frankly, business is continuing to boom, even in our new location. The market is a giant demand for what we do. And as I said, it's all about buying. It's very hard to find product. And if you can find product, you'll be fine.
You don't feel, of course, necessarily, you experience something pretty horrific when you invest kind of time, money, energy, sacrifice, all these things, and then have this go down. One thing you probably don't feel is completely alone in the sense of all these businesses downtown.
Not only do I not feel alone, but I feel blessed and lucky, which is maybe surprising, but I was able to pivot. Imagine being a health club, a restaurant, a bar, an entertainment venue, name 1,000 different kinds of businesses that had no opportunity to take the quick draconian steps that I did to reinvent ourselves. I feel completely blessed by the fact that our clients continue to want to do business with us, that some of my staff stayed with us, that we continue to have a presence and make a difference.
Let's talk about that. You had mentioned new location. Explain your pivot. Explain where you're at today, and how you're conducting business, satisfying your clients' needs, and so on.
We labored over finding a new space for Watchworks. I spent exactly 10 minutes on Craigslist, found a 3-story building that is divided. The upper level is the landlord. The left-hand side was empty, which is now Watchworks, and the right-hand side is a hair salon, very close to the Laurelhurst Theater. My wife and I went there. We met with the landlord. We looked at this 2-level space that had an office in front that we could set up a conference table, very much like this table. And the lower back room, shipping and receiving, and there's a kitchen with 2 enormous safes in it. You go upstairs, there's a watchmaking loft where my watchmaker, Paul, bless him, took apart the benches and equipment that we had at Watchworks with some wood butchery, reconfigured those specialized custom-made benches to fit in that loft and set up a shop. And then the upstairs back room is web development, inventory management, and an extra office space in case we have to see 2 sets of clients at once.
Now you're upstairs. You're not on ground level.
We are at ground floor with a little upstairs loft.
Got it. Okay, yeah. So you are on ground floor.
Ground
for
floor.
Customers and stuff.
And we're available by appointment only. And we have learned to say no to 1,000 projects that we would have said yes to prior. We just don't have the space, the bandwidth, the staff to be as full service as we used to be. And I purposefully spent those 10 minutes finding something that was not large. I thought that our business was in a transition of having me work less and lowering the stress and growth factors, and I didn't want it to grow legs. In retrospect, I probably should have gotten something a little bit bigger. It's very condensed, which is why we have to decline doing many of the things we used to do. We are mostly brokering, buying, and selling high-grade timepieces and occasional jewelry and some little bit of custom work. A lot of the repair work, although we still have a full-time watchmaker on staff, we just don't have the time for. It's just not in the cards.
Would you ever see yourself putting a small, very small, since you already have some, obviously plenty covered, would you ever see yourself doing something downtown again at all?
I don't see that in my future.
Okay.
However, I believe that there is a future for Watchworks that doesn't involve me.
Okay.
And I won't speak to what those new leaders will choose to do. I'm working 5 days a week now instead of 6 or 7. And I'm way calmer and way easier to be around with lower stress levels. And I just don't see myself having that sort of ambition. I've always joked that I'm as greedy as the next guy, but I'm also as lazy as the next guy. And I sort of temper my greed with my laziness.
Now, you like to travel?
I do.
What are some of the, this is something in our magazine, when we interviewed in the magazine, there's only so much paper. And today it's great because we can elaborate more. But tell me more about like hobbies and things that you're interested in, because it seems like whatever you dive into, I mean, you dive in deep.
I would say that hobbies, I love to cook. I love to entertain. I collect vehicles, including motorcycles, a little bit, but frankly, they are possessions that I'm caring less and less about these days. I spend a lot of time engaged on the water. We bought a boat. We occasionally will charter elsewhere where our boat can't immediately go. I just came back from a really nice trip on the Intracoastal Waterway in Florida, cruising around the Fort Myers area, Gasparilla Island, Usepa Island.
Are you more of a sail or power?
I grew up sailing on the
Okay.
East Coast, but power boats are more roomy and comfortable. So these days we are more involved in power boats, but I actually have ideals to go back to sailing at some level before I cash my chips in.
Is your family happier with this change that you've done with kind of refining your business model a bit and with this pivot? I mean, family's important to you, I can tell.
Absolutely. And, I'm about to turn 60 this year, as is Maureen. And we really believe there is more to life than business, more to life than a career. As I said, we've been blessed with luck, but with a lot of hard work. And I see myself having a different career before I'm over. It may be strictly entertainment. It may be cooking professionally. It may be flipping vehicles. Got a lot of interests. And although I really do love what I do, I would love to hand it off and start something else.
When you look to hand this off to the right opportunity, or whether it comes within your company with other partners or whatever, will you be out of watches, the business, completely?
This is a question that comes up at home all the time. I think that I would not, because so many years of connections, it would be impossible to really shed that completely. People will constantly be blowing up my phone. Hey, I have this. Hey, I need that. But for the most part, I'd like to simply refer it to my new cadre of experts. I can't imagine a world where I am not engaged transactionally. I love transactions.
I know you have an audience and a customer base way beyond Portland. I'm probably internationally. The way you seek out watches and how you put them out there, obviously internationally and nationally for sure. Is there anything you'd like to say to Portland as we wrap this up?
I have been interviewed by a number of news agencies in the last 2 years, including KA2U just a couple of days ago, about businesses that have transitioned out of downtown Portland, how they're doing, businesses that are about to do the same. We will not solve some of these problems that we're facing until we solve the both homelessness or houselessness issue combined with the horrible effects of drug addiction that our city faces. And this isn't just unique to Portland. It is literally everywhere in this country, but more so in Portland, maybe. Downtown will not be a happy, healthy place until we can literally clean up the streets and find ways to help people who are suffering either the results of any kind of mental or physical abuse that they've suffered, drug abuse, alcoholism, poor education, child abuse, and all of the various myriad of people are not just one thing. They're a combination of so many factors. And the more factors, the more difficult it is to pigeonhole or help someone. But this is what it's going to take for Portland to revitalize, as far as I'm concerned.
I wanted to end with that, but I'm too tempted to ask a question. You're a critical thinker. Do you have one particular idea?
Policy is not my
Okay.
no, and that's why, so many people have asked me, are you bitter? Do you blame the mayor? Do you blame the police? Do you blame the governor? I hate to point the finger. I like to be I'd like to make a cogent suggestion or not criticize, one or the other.
What you suggested was more of an observation as a whole on the city.
Yes.
Of what the big issues are.
These are our issues.
Well, today we've been with Alex Hofberg, and we appreciate you guys joining and hopefully enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.